So I said, well, if we're going to launch the second ever iteration
Uh-huh.
of the Chuck Taylor sneaker in 100-year history, we got to do this big, guys.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the project. I'm your host, Raymond O, and today we're going to be taking a dive into what it's like working for one of the largest sports organizations in the world. To kick things off, let me introduce the guest we'll be speaking with today. A native to DC, Terri Hines is currently the Executive Vice President of Communications for Fox Sports. And prior to that, she spent 10 years at Nike, working with both the Converse and Jordan brands, notably helping with the storytelling process for both the releases of the Chuck Taylor 2 and the Jordan 23. Outside of work, Hines is proactive in making an impact, doing work as a mentor, children's causes, health and wellness, and the arts as a member of the advisory board of the Rate Foundation, a corporate advisor for the UCLA Anderson School Center for Management of Enterprises in Media, Entertainment, and Sport, and a member of the board of directors for the LA Grant Foundation. And with that, I want to give a warm welcome to Terri.
Thank you,
Yep.
Raymond. That was very nice. Thank you. You're very generous.
So, get things started. You basically started your impressive career in marketing for Volkswagen of America, and then you moved on into communications with Nissan after finding a mentor. And then after that, you were able to begin your career at Nike as the director of communications for the Jordan brand. Could you take us back to what it was like when you first realized that you were basically going to be working for the largest, if not the largest, sports brand in the world?
The journey, sure. The journey, it wasn't a direct line or a direct path to Nike necessarily. It's very if we had more time, I could probably take you into what it was like
Mm-hmm.
leaving college and starting off in the automotive industry and then transitioning into working in one of the largest global sports brands, I think, in the world. But I will start back by saying I am a former athlete. One of the things we say
Mm-hmm.
at Nike is if you have a body, you're an athlete. So you're an athlete too. But I used to run track. So Nike was a part of my DNA from a very early age prior to college. And so fast forward, you end up in a career in an industry that you hadn't planned, that is automotive, and you excelled very well, but you always had in the back of your mind this what I call, I have a company sorry, a corporate career bucket list, a career bucket list. And on my career bucket list are companies that I'm passionate about and want to work for. Also on that bucket list are industries that I am interested in and want to work for. And Nike was one of those companies that was on my career bucket list at the top of the list as one of the premier companies that if I ever had an opportunity to work for, gosh, that would fulfill a dream. And, I am a big proponent of, whether you're a student or whether you're, 20, 30 years into your career, have a career bucket list, right? Don't just go
Mm-hmm.
through the motions. We wake up every day and, we spend time in our offices and with our colleagues, and we spend more time doing work than we do arguably at home. So why not do something that you're passionate about or work in a space, that brings you joy? And working for Nike definitely was that. So to transition from automotive to Nike made all the sense in the world to me because it was my dream. And they had, ironically, tried to recruit me some years ago prior to that moment, when I was in the automotive industry in a different space, a different job, a different world, more in the philanthropic space. And it just wasn't the right timing
Mm-hmm.
for that transition. So all of the things that I had accomplished with Nissan, starting in their marketing department, then getting promoted 3 times in 5 years, taking over their lifestyle PR shop for the East Coast, becoming the first, I think, head of executive communications as a middle manager for the biggest global CEO in automotive history at a very early stage in my career was incredible. And then I had experiences from being the executive director of the Nissan Foundation to running multicultural communications and marketing for Nissan, starting the first entertainment marketing practice for Nissan ever when entertainment marketing wasn't even a thing. I had all of these experiences that primed me
Mhm.
for Nike to reach out. And when they had an opening within the Jordan brand, I had had all of these experiences within a different industry that ended up being the perfect marriage for the Jordan brand. They wanted someone to come in who thought differently, who was a strategic thinking leader who could think outside the box of basketball and really think about how to tell the Jordan story in a unique and different way. And at the same time, the brand was growing by leaps and bounds at that time. I'm thinking, wow, I'm actually getting an opportunity to have this conversation. One, with a company that's number one on my bucket list. Two, with the Jordan brand. I'm a fan of basketball, right? So I have
Yeah.
I have in my family, sports is big in my family. I do have different members, relatives that are professional athletes across different sports, right? But basketball in my household, both college and professional basketball, were huge. So, and Michael Jordan was someone who I was wowed by when it came to basketball, and I really admired him, and I was a bit of a fan of his. So then when Jordan calls and says, "Hey, we've had a really hard time finding the right person to fill this head of comms and entertainment role," you drop everything.
Yeah.
You drop everything to figure out how you can position yourself to be the perfect choice for the role that they sought. So that's a long-winded story, but I just felt that you needed a little bit of primer to get,
Hmm.
how I actually got to this place. And the timing was perfect. The timing was perfect for me to transition. I'd spent a decade or 10 years in automotive and or a little longer in automotive, and the timing was right for me to pivot to work for the company of my dreams and work for a brand that um, was having a lot of fun and helmed by um, one of the greatest athletes of our generation. Um, and yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a little bit of flavor. That's a little bit of
No, yeah,
flavor
for sure.
to Jordan.
Um, yeah, that's a great answer. I think for a lot of us college students, especially, we get so caught up in the moment of like, oh, this is what we're gonna do right out the gate. And speaking with a lot of sports professionals, like it's not how it actually is. Like a lot of you guys did get your start in other industries and then slowly did transition into sports. And just hearing your story and how you moved over from marketing over into
Yeah.
eventually going into Nike, that's just great to hear.
And the other thing I'll just share, I don't know if it'll help or not, but a little bit about the story is, starting in a completely different industry. And then also I started my career in marketing. Making that shift to communications was an interesting place too, because I made that shift because I got bored. I made that shift because I wanted to do something differently. And I ended up having a mentor who saw something in me that he said was special. And he said, "I want to spend some time teaching you about what it is that I do," because I was so curious about communications and PR. And I wanted to understand more about this storytelling because I felt I was a natural storyteller, but I didn't at that time necessarily have a job that allowed me to do that and lean into that space. And so I ended up learning about PR and communications and storytelling and branding because I had an amazing mentor. And that's why mentoring for me today is so very important, because someone took a chance on me, and someone let
Mhm.
me shadow him for 5 to 6 months, and that someone introduced me to his boss's boss once upon a time, and I was able to pitch and tell my story in like a 5 minute elevator pitch,
Yeah.
in an office, and not really pitch myself, but just tell him who I was and why I was interested in comms. Fast forward, my mentor resigns from the company 30 days later and tells the um, head of comms at the time, his boss's boss, that, hey, I know you're going to go outside the company. Maybe you're going to look for someone inside the company to replace me, but you're not going to find them. I really think you need to take a chance on Terri Hines. Remember the young lady that I introduced you to? No,
Mhm.
she doesn't have a traditional comms or PR background. No, she hasn't been doing this for a long time, but I'm telling you, there's something in her. She's young, she's new, she brings fresh ideas. You got to take a chance on her.
Mhm.
And without an interview, I ended up getting his job, my mentor's job, and my career in PR and communications took off from there. So, having someone see a bright light in me at that stage of my career really has set me on my trajectory to where I am today. And so that's, a super important part of the story. And then in that journey, I actually went back to school and got my graduate degree in
Mhm.
communications because I didn't know exactly what I would need a master's in comms for, but I knew it would set me up to be different and set me apart from the competition moving forward. So I think that's a little bit of my personal background. I'm not saying everybody has to go and get a master's degree,
Uh-huh.
but I think that helped to set me apart and help teach me to be more strategic in my approach, to think outside of the box, and to think globally. And Jordan is a global brand. Nike is a global company, as you stated at the top of this. And so I brought that with me when I went to interview for the Jordan job, and kind of the rest is history. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
spent 10
definitely.
years at Nike telling stories about two amazing brands, both Jordan and Converse.
Yeah. So kind of going back to your time with both Jordan and Converse. So the last time we spoke, you were able to tell us the entire story of how that Jordan 23 launch happened.
Oh, I
And
did? Okay.
yeah,
I
that
told the whole
the
story?
the whole story, you still
Okay.
get goosebumps thinking about it.
Mhm.
But what we really didn't go over was highlights from your time over at Converse. Was there anything specific about working with as the vice president of global communications with Converse that was a huge highlight for you? I know I did mention the release of the Chuck Taylor too. Would
Mhm.
that be a huge one?
That's definitely one. I would say there are probably two. One relates to product and the other relates to people. So I'll take the
Mhm.
product one first since that's what you mentioned. So the Converse is a more than a century old brand.
Yeah.
And at that time that I was at Converse, they had just crossed 100 years within a couple of years of me joining the brand. And Nike was finally starting to really invest in the brand, and the brand was growing by leaps and bounds. And it was largely a licensee run company, which is a different model from Nike. So the Converse license was owned separately by other licensees, other entities. And Converse was in the business of buying back its licenses from all of these companies around the globe. And when I joined, they had the license for North America, they had just taken the license back in China, and they were beginning to take their license back, so that they were a wholly owned company, much like Nike is in most
Mhm.
parts of the world. So as the company was taking its licenses back, it was growing. And then we were also creating new product that was different. Yes, we did a lot of, in the Jordan speak, you'd say retro, right?
Mhm.
So, yes, at Converse, we were creating some nostalgic product. Converse was rooted in basketball, but had a long life cycle in this music sort of lifestyle space.
Mhm.
And when I was there, we were really leaning into that. And I know we may talk about Converse rubber tracks a little bit later, but we were really leaning into that. And the Chuck 2 was born out of new product, new thinking, new innovation, groundbreaking technology that was built into that. So I said, well, if we're going to launch the second ever iteration
Uh-huh.
of the Chuck Taylor sneaker in 100-year history, we got to do this big, guys. This is not like your ordinary press launch. This is not your ordinary marketing launch. This is not your ordinary campaign. We got to do this a little differently. So, from a comms perspective, I want to figure out how we can tell this story in a big way. And we have got to make this an experience for the media, right? That we want to tell the story about the Converse brand, and at that time about the Chuck 2 sneaker. So, how do we do that? Well, first, you start with a global event and you plan to bring in media from across the globe. We'd never done that before at
Mhm.
Converse before coming up with this particular idea. And keep in mind, I told you that Jordan 23 story and
Yeah.
how we really created a story around that. And it was about
And how
walking back in Michael's shoes, right?
no, yeah, and how detail oriented everything was to make executing that entire story.
Yes, yes. And so, make you we wanted to make at that for that launch, we wanted to make the journalists who were coming to cover really experience what it
It's
felt
12
like to be
o'clock.
Michael when he was, earning his six rings on the court, and why the 23 sneaker was so important. So I tried to bring that feeling and sentiment and emotion into launching the Chuck 2. The difference with the Converse brand is there's no man tied to the brand,
Hmm.
right? You have with Jordan, it's built after Michael Jordan, his vision and his legacy that he's left on court. That's what that brand is centered around, his greatness. Converse is a little bit different. So, how can we create this sort of emotive experience that walks the media through what it's like at Converse, what the culture, what it feels like, because ultimately it's the media that have to tell that story and frame that narrative to make consumers excited and interested in purchasing our product. And we created a global event. We flew in 200, I think it was about 230 to 250 press, literally from around the world. We used a venue. I'm like, this has got to be big, guys. So go big, go hard, or go home. That's my motto. But what venue would be big enough that would really enable us to show that we're a global brand. We're here to stay. We're doing things differently. We had just relocated our corporate headquarters to downtown Boston, and our headquarters were right on the waterfront. And it was a shiny new building. Everything was new. So we were in a new era. So don't ask me how we got here, but somehow we got to a cruise line hangar
Really.
because Converse's headquarters, and if you know where their headquarters are on
Mhm.
I forget the name of the river, but where the headquarters are located, it's right near an area of Boston where boats and cruise ships come in, and they actually go by the windows of our office. So I'm like, okay, well, let's go to the cruise ship, and what does that mean? Well, we ended up renting out the hangar for a cruise ship. So think of the size of one.
No,
Think
yeah.
of what a hangar would look like. And we use that as our sort of foundational space. And we created three staging experiences in one that were
Mhm.
all interconnected by a tunnel within a cruise line hangar. Like it was ridiculous, right? And so we wanted to give a technological experience. We wanted to give the media a sensory experience. We wanted to dramatically display. We had like 200 of the same Chuck Taylor on a horseshoe. ridiculously sized table flanked by the head of product in a dark space. So imagine it was almost like if you could go to a fun house at an amusement park. It was like that, but it didn't scare you. That's the only difference, right? Music, those fun houses scare you. There's no scaring involved. It was all tutorial and educational and learning about all of the innovation and the technology and the bigness of where Converse was. We were putting ourselves on a big stage that
Mhm.
we hadn't done ever before. And at the end of the experience, we gave all of these journalists and some influencers, we gave them the opportunity right there and then to try on the sneaker for themselves, to test the sneaker for themselves, and garner that immediate reaction. That blew up that launch bigger than anything that Nike had ever done. Nike had never done a launch up until that moment. Whereby you allowed journalists to try on your product straight away. Like, what if they don't like it? What if
Yeah.
it doesn't provide the cushioning that we said it does? What if it doesn't provide the feeling of support or I don't know what it is. What if it doesn't do what we claimed it would do? It's taking a big risk, right? To do that in the middle of a press event where people are writing about this all over the world. We took a big chance, we took a gamble, and it worked. What that translated to is kids lining up outside Converse stores around the country for the Chuck 2 sneaker. Never in the history of Nike had any other brand had kids lining up outside of sneaker stores to buy a sneaker other than the Jordan, other than the Air Jordan and retro sneakers, and I'm sure you have a pair. And I don't know if you stood in line, but kids, fans of sneakers, sneaker culture, they line up, and that had never happened before. And we created that with the Chuck 2. And I'm so proud, to have been a part of that launch. I can't take all the credit for it
Mhm.
because we are a team and we built it as a team. But I definitely was at the head of the table on the ideation and bringing it to life. And that is absolutely one of my proudest moments. And I'll give you the second one fast. The second one really is around people. I worked with some super special people at Converse and at Jordan too. But I worked with some super special people. I was tasked when I was promoted from Jordan to come over and lead branded communications for Converse. I was tasked with inheriting a team of about 4 to 5 people
Mhm.
and assessing the needs of the team, assessing the talents that I had on the team, and I had the instruction to okay, you're going to go in there, you're going to build a pipeline, and you're going to create a pipeline. You're going to create a whole global team for Converse as Converse is taking back its brands across the country. And you're going to create a team of communicators and influencers and entertainment specialists that are really going to help you tell the Converse story in all major quadrants of the globe. Okay, great. How do I build a pipeline? Where's the playbook for that? How do we put that together? There wasn't one. So just in Nike true fashion, just do it. So Terri, you can figure it out. That's why we promoted you. That's why we put you in that role. Fantastic. And I ended up, Raymond, finding the most passionate, if I can say, kick ass thought leaders, strategic storytellers, some influencers in their respective spaces from New York, Los Angeles, Toronto, Mexico City, Sao Paulo, um, in Asia, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Taipei, Seoul, and in Western Europe, Berlin, Amsterdam, London, Barcelona, Paris. I still keep in touch with many of those colleagues that I hired by hand myself. And we built that team from about 4 to 5 of us. When I left to come to Fox, I left a team of about 45 people
Wow.
and super passionate, super talented. And I treat my team members like my family. It's my hope that I do. They feel like everyone feels like my family. So I hire people that I like and that I want to work around, but that are smart and that push me to be my best self and push me to be a good leader. Because I think a good leader is only as good as how much they continue to allow themselves to learn, because that helps me to continue to grow and get the best out of the people that I work with. I'm constantly in a state of learning. So if it's not a reciprocal relationship, that you have with someone who you work for or someone who works for you, you're not doing it right. And that's why to this day, I remain a mentor to many of the people that I used to work with at Converse. I'm friends with them. I know when they have kids, they call me to do their podcast or for references to things, because I genuinely care about these people. So that's probably the second biggest success story,
Yeah.
and takeaway from Converse. And when we were at Converse during my era at Converse, in partnership with our marketing team, and our CMO was phenomenal. His name was Jeff Cottrell. We grew that brand by over $1 billion in just a few short years.
I will say that I definitely was one of those kids.
Yeah.
Still to this day, my favorite pair of shoes ever are is my pair of wolf gray Chuck Twos, that
Really?
my sister actually got for me for my birthday. So
Uh,
when I was able to realize that you had worked on that entire launch, I can still remember that all the media that
wow.
around it and like the
Yeah.
lunar lawn tech that was going into the
Yeah.
shoe.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I still wear them to this day. They're all beat up, but I still wear them.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. When
Yeah,
you're making me go back in time in my mind, and you're taking me back to some really, really happy memories. So thank
yeah.
you.
I know we are running a little short on time. Just two more quick questions, and
Okay.
then we'll close it up. So one of the biggest things that Nike, I know Converse super big into it. So is the Jordan Brand. It is corporate social responsibility,
Mhm.
and with brands that do things like this, with Converse, it was like the Converse Rubber Tracks recording studios,
Mhm.
and really looking ahead and being one of the first corporate organizations to take a stand. How key has that really been to promoting minority creatives like myself, um, to provide equal opportunities for people looking for a job in the sports industry?
Oh, that's loaded. I feel like that's like two questions in one. Let me see how I can unpack that. Converse, I will say I've been privileged to work across a number of brands, and all of the brands that I have worked for, including Fox, my current company, have a heart to giving back to
Mm-hmm.
the communities, right? Because it's important for us to be a responsible corporate citizen. In this specific example about that you're asking about with regards to Converse was, like I said, a brand that was rooted in basketball, but enjoyed a long heritage in music and this sort of lifestyle, cool kids space. If you come back through the 40s, 50s, and 60s during that time. But always, with a toe, I like to say, in basketball. And at that time, we really wanted to lean into that music space.
Mm-hmm.
And without making this a very long story, because it is a much longer story, Converse Rubber Tracks was born out of an idea that our CMO had, who I mentioned before, Jeff Cottrell. And we created Converse Rubber Tracks to give back to the community in the way that the community and kids and culture gave to the brand. So,
Sure.
why not create a space where musicians and creatives could go free of charge to record their music, to record their, could have been a podcast, to record um, whatever was on their mind to use to either launch their career, enhance their career. A lot of new musicians and creative were born out of Converse Rubber Tracks. We created a studio in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. That was the
Hmm.
first big rubber track studio, then in Boston. And then we had pop up rubber track studios around the globe. I remember we had them in Sao Paulo, and we did one in Toronto, and I'm sure we did one in Amsterdam, and I know we did one in Shanghai. But these were pop up rubber tracks where artists could come and record and perform and just be. And the
Hmm.
cost of doing so was our cost because it was our way to give back. Literally, there was no charge to anyone who used our space. And there was a vetting process, and you had to apply to be able to use the space. But I can remember meeting some amazing creatives and musicians that got their career start and launched doing this. We had a concert once in Williamsburg that Mary J. Blige said, "Hey, I'm going to be in town and I want to perform for the kids because I have an album launching." It was her London Sessions album. And she did a private listening session
Hmm.
for a bunch of the aspiring and upcoming artists. And we invited press, and it was a fantastic event. But Converse was really rooted in the creative community, and we did a lot in giving back. Outside of Rubber Tracks, we partnered with a number of local arts organizations where
Uh-huh.
we were really seeding back into the youth of Boston, and organizations like that we partnered with around the globe so that sense of giving was clear. It also opened up opportunities for students, for interns, to come and really learn what it was like, behind the curtain, working for Converse. So you could be a musician and come to work for a sneaker company in retail, and
Uh-huh.
that didn't make any sense. But actually, it did under our family and world at Converse, right? Because we wanted to bring the most creative minds together, and it didn't matter what space you came from. It didn't have to be a linear path. Like I said, life is not linear. My career
Yeah,
has not been a straight line, and it is possible to bob and weave through your career to get to where you are. And a lot of it can be timing, talent, um, but Converse definitely was a brand that wanted to make sure that those doors were open to just about anybody.
for
So I
sure.
don't know if that fully answers your
No,
question,
yeah.
but
Um, that was great. I
yeah.
guess just one last thing. What would your advice be to minorities looking to one day work for these big organizations that you have worked for and are currently working for, the Nikes and Fox Sports of the world? What would your advice be to them?
Preparation is key, right? Just like you have to study for the upcoming philosophy class, the test that you have to take that you told me about before we started this, just like you had to prepare for Professor Antonello's class here today, just like you have to prepare throughout your entire college career to make sure that you're graduating and making your family and your parents proud. You have to prepare for these opportunities. So if you want to work for a company like Nissan, if you want to work for a company like Nike or Jordan or Converse, if you want to work for a company like Fox Sports or anything, I say if you want to be an astronaut, you know what I mean? You better study up on NASA, right? You should learn about the company that you want to be a part of, right? You
Mhm.
might not be able to learn everything because it's not until you come to working inside a company that you really learn about its culture. But if you have a passion for a particular brand and you're a consumer of a particular brand, you should know a lot about that brand before you say, well, you know, I'm going to work here because I ran track and that should be good enough. Or I'm going to
Mhm.
work here because I played football and that should be good enough. Or I'm a musician and, Converse is coming after musicians, so that should be good enough. No, you should, just like you know your craft and you're preparing for your test, you should know about that brand. So preparation is key. I say study, study, study. And then I say networking is important too. I talked about a mentor that opened a door for me to launch my career or transition my career from marketing into PR and communications. What I didn't talk about are the number of mentors that I have had along my career journey that have helped me to pivot when it was time to pivot. I
Mhm.
tell people every time you see me jump, I shouldn't say jump, but every time you see me move to a different company, it's just because I'm checking off the career bucket list, or it's time
Mhm.
for me to make a pivot, or I might have gotten bored. Best time you see me if I make a pivot is I'm getting bored. But it's also about mentoring. Make sure that you're networking with people um, that are in spaces that you're interested in or that you think there's a learning to be had.
Mhm.
Don't overlook or underestimate the power of a mentor because he or she could really open the door to what your next best and favorite career opportunity might be. So that's a little bit of advice, that I would give. And,
Sure.
stay passionate. Um, your first job might not be your most favorite job, and that's okay. I feel like today, the youth of today, they want to get the best, the most money, and I've got to feel passionate because if I'm not passionate, I just won't work there. Sometimes you got to start on the left to get to the right because
Mhm.
I never knew that working in the automotive industry as long as I did would prepare me and offer me so much opportunity so that when Nike came calling, I was ready. It was because of the career I had in automotive that I was ready to work for a brand like Nike. Coming out of college, you never could have told me that. Not in a million years. So it is okay to go left before you go right and know that that's okay. It's also okay to change your mind. It's also okay to want to do something else. I tried this. I tried marketing. I'm not interested. I'm going to go over here. I started out being a journalist, but I really don't want to chase stories. I want to work behind the scenes and I want to tell the story this way. I started out wanting to be an astronaut, but now I want to be a doctor. It's okay. It's okay to change course. And I think students and young people aren't told that enough, that it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to change paths. It's okay to get bored and then educate yourself enough to pivot you and prepare you for what that next amazing opportunity is going to be. And just be patient. You know, it
Yeah.
will it will all come and it will all work out in due time.
All right. That was great advice.
I know what I'm
just
starting
just
to sound.
just
I sound
hands
like I'm
down.
preaching.
But yeah, that
Is that
is
good?
actually the end of the questions I have for you. So
We didn't
this
miss anything?
nah, that should be all good. This is
Okay.
gonna be the end of the project,
Okay.
as I titled this interview. Um,
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk to someone looking aspiring to be in your shoes one day.
Oh, I appreciate it. It was great talking with you as well. And if you want a career in sports television, talk to me about that too. We didn't go a lot into Fox Sports, but we're doing some amazing things here, and it's fun. It's fun. Oh, I you got 5 minutes. I can tell you one more quick story. In blending the old world with the new world. So
Okay.
relationships are key, Raymond. Why?
Mhm.
Because in my current role at Fox Sports, I was able to bring my old life and my old family, I guess I shouldn't say old, but my former family, let's say former, my former family to work with me at Fox. You want to know how?
Just by staying in
Yes.
touch.
Can you guess? No, Raymond, you're paying attention. Come on. You don't know. You don't know? Okay, so last month we kicked off, Fox is football, right? So football, football, football all day.
Yeah,
But last month we kicked off the NASCAR season,
the Daytona
Daytona
500 and
500. And Michael
yep,
Jordan, who is my former boss, started a race team that was announced I think they announced it in December, November, December of last year. His race team is teamed 2311
Mhm.
that he formed with Denny Hamlin, who is Daytona 500, multiple time Daytona 500 winner. And they formed a new race team. Their numbers 23, Michael, Denny's is 11.
Mhm.
And their driver is Bubba Wallace. Their new driver is Bubba Wallace. So they created this new race team, but they had never done any press around it. So I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to pull the lever on the relationships that I maintain to this day, I'm going to pull the Michael lever. And I was able to broker a deal, and not a deal, I shouldn't say broker a deal, but create a feature, and the first exclusive interview with Michael Jordan and his new race team that aired exclusively on Fox. And it's because I spent 4 years at that brand. It's because of the
Mhm.
loyalty. It's because he trusts me. It's because when I left Jordan, I actually asked Michael if it was okay for me to make a move to Converse. I didn't tell you that. I sat hip to hip with him and had a conversation with him about me leaving the Jordan brand to go to Converse. He trusted me
Mhm.
and he wanted me to continue growing. And I maintain that relationship to this day with he and with his business manager. So when I made the call and I said, hey, what do you think? And they said, we'll do it. And
Mhm.
so I put it together, you know, do you need to check on this, that, and the third? No, Terry, you got it. Put on your Jordan hat, just do it. And so I put together and working with our production team, and I hope you saw it. And if you don't, if you
Mhm.
didn't see it, I think I might have a link that I can share with you. Um, but we created the first exclusive interview, and it was Michael, Denny Hamlin, Bubba Wallace, and I said the only person that gets to interview him is who I decide. And so if the Daytona 500 is the Super Bowl of NASCAR and of racing, we need a
Mhm.
Super Bowl winner, somebody with a
Mhm.
ring, because Michael has
Yep.
rings, Denny has trophies,
Yep.
to come and interview them.
And then you
So
brought in
I
Michael
brought in Michael
Strahan.
Strahan. And so I got Michael Strahan, and that's unheard of in our world. So normally
Yeah.
racing people interview racing people, but and Michael Strahan is not a racing guy; he's a football guy. And I said, this is the only way it's going to work, right? Because Michael Jordan also talks to people he only talks to people he knows and who he's comfortable with. And so I actually put it together before I told or asked Michael Strahan if he could do it. And Michael works for us. So, everybody on air,
Mhm.
they're my coworkers too. So I put this whole thing together, and with our producers, they're like, yeah, 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 yeah. Anybody told Michael Straight? So we call him Stray. Anybody told Stray? No. And so I texted Stray, and I said, hey, so I pitched you to interview Michael Jordan at Daytona for his new race team, and I know I didn't ask permission first, but are you good with that? And he wrote back, I love you. Yes. And that's a little bit about how that came together. But I touched on that because it's all about relationships, right?
Yeah.
And being able to bring my former life into my current life at Fox Sports has been amazing. And that for me, I've been here at Fox Sports now over 4 years. That is definitely my highlight of being at this brand. And you get a lot of satisfaction. Not only nobody at my company, believe it or not, nobody at Fox had a connection to Michael Jordan. Nobody.
Mhm.
So I felt wonderful about being able to make that happen, not only for the brand, but for that moment, because I think it's a very important moment for Michael and his team and what Bubba is trying to do and what NASCAR is trying to do in terms of diversifying the sport. But as we ended the interview and we shot it, you should know we shot that interview 2 days before the actual Daytona 500. So on that
Mhm.
Friday, Daytona 500 is on Sunday, and we shot it in Daytona at the NASCAR headquarters. And as we're walking Michael out, and right before he gets to the car, now we're in COVID, right? So we're
Mhm.
masked and everybody's tested, and we're supposed to be,
Yeah.
fist bumping and
This
elbows,
is a
and we're
COVID
not supposed to be
elbow.
hugging. right? And we're huggers. Like at Jordan, we're hug. We're family, right? And so I walk him to the car, and right before he gets into the car, and there's like a entourage of people, right? And so right before he gets to the car, he turns and he gives me a big, ridiculous bear hug in front of everybody, right? So he gives me this big bear hug, and I'm hugging him back, and one brain side of my brain is thinking he's not supposed to be hugging me because of COVID, but okay. So, so he's like a big brother to me. So
Hmm.
so he's hugging me like a big brother would hug you really, really hard. And I'm whispering in his ear and I'm telling him, thank you. Like, I really appreciate you doing this because you didn't have to do this. And he kind of pushed my shoulders back and looked me square in the eye. And he said, I only did this because of you. And he turned around and got in the car. And
That's
they like a movie. And they drove away.
that
And his business manager, she hugged me, and they drove away. So I wanted to share that little story with you
yeah,
about
that story deserved all the applause just now.
because I don't think I told that in class,
Oh
in the
yeah,
other class.
no.
Yeah,
Um, okay, again, super thank you for doing this with us.
that's
Yeah,
absolutely.
I